people, I have to tell you about this ongoing harassment I've been experiencing in regards to doing a video on Terence McKenna. Recently, it's a very, very profound struggle. Recently, there's been bricks smashing through my window, landing on the floor, and I walk in and I pick these bricks up, and there's like a piece of paper attached to them, and I open it up, and on one side of the piece of the paper is a mushroom, and it says, "Do a Terence McKenna video." And then on the other side of a piece of paper is a mushroom, but the head has been chopped off, and it says, "And if you don't, ... And so it said in the thing that I have to smile and pretend everything is all right. And this is not a cry for help or anything like that. I'm absolutely fine. It's not like I'm getting, bricks through my window with like pictures of Magic Mushroom Man on them saying, "Do it now," before I get angry. But I'll just leave it at this and say this is highly demanded, and I'm delighted to comply by my own free will and bring you a Terence McKenna video. So what I want to talk to you about Terence McKenna is, of course, we're going to get into psychedelics. Believe me, we're going to dive into this stuff. But I want to actually talk about what it means to be a monkey. And I want to talk about in the context of that story that we often hear. Do you ever hear people talk about this where it's like, imagine if before you were born, there was actually this place that we all lived in. We were all like babies in heaven, if you will. All sitting up there in the clouds, babies in heaven, chilling out. We're all like, we were little fat babies as well, because we're like cool fat babies sitting around there smoking clouds and stuff like this. And we're all hanging out there. We're like the boys, and we're kind of bored because heaven is like perfect and there's nothing going on. And we look at each other and we say to ourselves, what if we played a video game? What if we played a video game? But it wasn't like a video game with like the controller and all that type of stuff. It was more like, what if we actually put on like virtual reality headsets and enter this thing called like life, reality, time, the prison of Chronos, if you will. We dropped down into it and we got these little avatars, all right? So we all got to get these avatars and drop down into this virtual reality. It's like Fortnite, this virtual reality realm, and run around and like hang out together there. And everybody would be like, "Whoa, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, that's awesome." But then what would happen if we we did that a bit, we smoked some more cloud and we're like, "Whoa, that was crazy. That was a lot of fun." But then we kind of got bored of that too, because we kind of running around and we knew what was going on and we weren't that scared of anything. There was no, meaning in it at all. So we kind of looked at each other. We scratched the noggins and we said, what if we brainwashed ourselves before we went in? So just as we dive in, we forget. We forget where we are. We forget that we live in heaven. We forget that heaven exists. In fact, what if we dive in and all that we remember is what we pick up from the moment we are born? So it's like this flash, and then it's a blank, and then we end up inside Fortnite and Minecraft, inside the virtual reality, and we have to actually like run around, and we will actually seriously be invested in the game. Imagine how like much more exciting the game will be. It's like one of the babies will smoke this big puff of cloud and be like, the way when you watch a good movie and you get really angry because you can't watch it again from the start with fresh eyes. This will be like being able to watch it with fresh eyes every single time. It's brilliant. And all of us be like, "Whoa, yeah, man, that's going to be awesome." And so we say, we'll do it. And so what we do is we create this like big matrix. We create this big server, create this big reality, or maybe we ask our dad to help us, maybe we ask our dad, we're like, "Dad," he's on his big throne, taking care of Jesus, being like, "What, boyos, what's up?" And he's like, "Would you make us a reality?" And he's like, "Oh, fuck's sake, all right, here we go." And he puts together this matrix, this prison, this Fortnite, this Minecraft place. And so all of us are like, "This is awesome." We all get kind of nervous. It's like, "Oh shit." So we're like going to forget, like, what if something happens? It's like, well, we're just going to have to take a risk. I guess it's not that serious because it's not real, like we're in reality, like we're in heaven here, we're fine. It's just virtual reality. It's not real. So we all plug in and we dive down into it. And of course the flash happens and we don't know what has happened. And we all wake up. God knows how we wake up. Maybe you wake up as a rock, or a rabbit. I wake up as a proud boyo or a fox or something like that, or a bird, or maybe we all wake up as like worms or something like that, or God knows, maybe we wake up as like stars. I don't know how we'd start. But imagine that we've forgotten and we're sort of just rolling through this thing, this virtual reality, really, really unaware, and we're not necessarily like people in the way that we thought we were. Because I guess in heaven we weren't really people either. We were these pure essences, these pure, boyo baby beings that were just like pure energy in some sense. Because that's what you have to be in heaven. You can't be like a bloke with like a smelly armpit and like, pooping and stuff. You have to be perfect. So maybe that's what it was. And when we dive in, we don't enter into a human body per se. We actually enter into, we enter into reality in some sense, and we make stuff. And so maybe we'd start off as like a sun and then evolve into, or transform as the game progresses. As time moves on, we transform into something else, and we keep moving on. And then eventually we find ourselves as these like apes, as these like characters in the jungle. We're sitting up there in trees, we're smelly, we're like hairy, and we're doing all that stuff and eating fruit and all this. And of course, the nature is the game. The reason why the game is exciting is because it has this thing called time, entropy, if you will, and it's progressing through as things go on. It's a very, very interesting thing. So time is progressing, and that actually makes the game exciting because it's almost like there's a mission in the game. We have to somehow not get tricked by this thing and swallowed up. And so these monkeys that we are at this stage, us and the boyos, and we don't even remember that we were once all boyos in heaven together as young men. Instead, we are just boyos participating in the game, and we leave, like the climate changes, and we leave the jungle. We have to, we're forced to, and we take along our boyettes, and we all wander onto the savannah. It's a really weird and scary place, but this has happened millions of times for us before. We've just forgotten. We're well able to adapt. And so what we do is we start, changing our diet. We start eating deer. We start eating ruminants, which is probably another boyo at some point, but let's brush that aside. And as we're eating ruminants, these ruminants, they poop. Disgusting thing, I know. And inside this poop, you won't like this. Inside this poop, mushrooms grow. And so what we do, because we're boyos, is that we eat the mushrooms because we're mad, and we'll eat anything because we're trying to change our diet because we're in the savannah. It's kind of a nasty thing the way the savannah's gone. And so we're having to adapt. We're in a finding ourselves moment of our lives. So we're eating this deer for the first time, and we're eating this mushrooms for the first time. But these mushrooms are not just any old mushrooms. They're actually quite interesting mushrooms, and this might have something to do with how we organize the game, because we might have realized that it's a little bit intense to kind of just drop in there and drop into the game and completely forget and not know what's going on. Like, we might need to have an out, a way that we can go back to heaven. We can go back to the other world, if you will. And so we leave around all these little tools and tricks. We leave around, mushrooms, maybe DMT, maybe they put these two, this MOA inhibitor beside this other bark tree or something like that. You get ayahuasca. We put out psychedelics of all this type of stuff. We litter them around. And the trick is that when we're playing the game and we eat one of these special potions or something like that, it reveals the nature of the game to us. It actually pulls the curtain back on us and wakes us up to the true nature of the world. And so we're running around as these monkeys, and we're quite actually unconscious. We're quite unaware of the true nature of the game. And then these monkeys first pick up these mushrooms and try them, and they have this profound revelation experience. They experience for the first time this realization that, oh my God, this reality is not quite what it seemed like it was. There's something more to this than we think. Now, that's a wacky experience for the poor monkey. And so what happens with the monkey is he takes this psychedelics, and then suddenly the stable world that he saw around him, which is organized in a very certain way, starts to evolve. And what happens is everything starts to sort of like move and talk and morph. And it's almost like everything is sort of living in a strange way, which is quite profound stuff. Suddenly all our conceptions of being a monkey, it gets dissolved, and you're like, I'm not a monkey. I'm some type of like collection of weird fingers, and I can hear the fingers talking to themselves. I can hear the blood vessels talking to themselves, and oh my God, what is that sky and all this type of stuff? And it's a profound thing for the monkey to experience, but it's a catalyst for the game taking a step forward. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what might be happening to the monkey in that moment. Of course, Terence was big on the idea of the dissolution of boundaries, the boundaries getting dissolved down, and your mind exploding open and you experiencing life for what it actually is. Now, this sounds an awful lot like what I would understand as the left brain and the right brain. Yes, I've come back to my favorite topic once again. And I would understand this ego, this left brain, as this part of your mind that crafts an avatar, and this avatar blocks out all the other things in reality in favor of a mission, an identity, and a goal. So you put yourself sort of in a tunnel vision. You say to yourself, I am a monkey, or I am a high finance banker, or I am a boyo, or I am something. I individualize myself and create a craft in individuality. And then this has a sort of good and bad associated with it, a place that I'm going, a mission that I'm going on. And this is what we get caught up in as like our purpose and our goal and whatnot. Now, what's interesting is that, and a very, very basic study of the left brain, the right brain, you watched that video I did with Jill Bolte-Taylor, when the left brain turns off, it actually, when we go more into this right brain consciousness and we experience the consciousness of the right brain, we actually experience a much crazier world, a much wilder world, a world that is much more ineffable than we think, a world that is much more profound, because this idea of the mission and all this stuff, it all just dissolves and becomes meaningless. There's no boundary between me and my hand in the air. There's no boundary between me and the person there in the future. It's all just energy, man. You become like a yoga girl. You become actually quite inefficient. Now, this is very interesting because your mind is divided into these two types of perception, and weirdly, the right brain is the one more in touch with reality. It seems like reality is a lot closer to this flux, this boundaryless flux of like a quantum soup or a ever-living, dreaming fire that we all interact with. And perhaps when you take something like psychedelics and the world starts to flux and move like a dreaming fire, maybe you're actually seeing something that is closer to what the nature of the world actually is, which is weird. Now, Terence talked about this briefly, so I'm going to play a little clip by him here that talks about that.
Since, I've made this example before, a child lying in a crib and a hummingbird comes into the room, and the child is ecstatic because this shimmering iridescence of movement and sound and attention, it's just wonderful. I mean, it is an instantaneous miracle when placed against the background of the dull wallpaper of the nursery and so forth. But then mother or nanny or someone comes in and says, "It's a bird, baby. Bird, bird." And this takes this linguistic piece of mosaic tile and places it over the miracle and glues it down with the epoxy of syntactical momentum. And from now on, the miracle is confined within the meaning of the word. And by the time a child is 4 or 5 or 6, no light shines through. They have tiled over every aspect of reality with a linguistic association that blunts it, limits it, and confines it within cultural expectation. But this doesn't mean that this world of signification is not outside, still existent, beyond the horizons, the foreshortened horizons of a culturally validated language.
Now, this is very interesting and very, very flattering for me, because this is Terence ragging on jargon. He is saying jargon is a bad thing. Now, we can talk about this idea of us babies in heaven trying to drop into this matrix of ours. And maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe the flash is obviously a pretty big deal, but maybe it doesn't happen instantaneously. Maybe the sort of maybe as a kid we actually are a little bit more closer to heaven than we think. We're a little bit more in touch with the world than we think. But what happens is that over time, as our ego consolidates, we tile over our reality all this language. As he said, this hummingbird comes in, which is almost like a magic flux of experience that they witness in this. It's all its iridescent beauty, and then we slap bird on top of it that reduces it down to a category. The next time it floats in, we just pop bird out of our minds. We just throw the jargon at it. We no longer interact with it directly. We put up a wall between us and it. And maybe this is the beginning of the virtual reality headset that starts to slip over our eyes. And of course, the experience of someone who's an adult is that everything sort of goes dead after a while, and you only really care about the things that matter towards, getting your money and paying your taxes. That's really what you sort of slip into at some point. And then there's this terrible thing that needs to happen to you, the midlife crisis, where your jargon has to dissolve, your mission has to dissolve, your identity has to dissolve, and you have to actually reconnect with the world and have these shocking experiences of becoming a person again, becoming a child again, opening your eyes to the nature of the world, learning to see again, learning to interact with the world again. Then you see that the world is way more living than you think. Now, this is profound in its consequences because, as Mircea Eliade, this is the gentleman sitting here, he would talk about the sacredness of the world in ancient religions that is sort of lacking from philosophical traditions like Greek philosophy and Christianity and all these type of things. For Eliade, the ancient idea was known as animism, and this is where you get this weird thing in ancient pagan religions where, like the trees talk and the rocks have a personality and the rivers have spirits and all this type of stuff. And this seems like a silly thing. But in fact, this looks a little bit like how the right brain might perceive the world. Of course, the left brain can't perceive faces. It's not very empathetic, whereas the right brain is. The right brain perceives personality in things. Perhaps the right brain perceives personality in everything. The right brain perceives personality not only in a rock, in a spirit, in a tree. It also perceives personality in concepts. For example, fortune, lovely concept, would have been known as fortuna, which is actually a woman. That is a girl. That used to be a god. Victory, a dead, empty, jargonized concept for us speaking the Anglo speak, was actually known as a goddess. She was a girl. Anger, for the Greeks, was Ares. These things, these conceptions, this language was alive, it was living, it was animated, because the world was animated, because the thing in touch with reality that sees the world as actually animated. And it's a fallacy. Maybe it's a left-brained egotistical fallacy to see the world as inanimate. This idea that the world is a dead machine is actually precisely the virtual reality headset that us babies seem to have organized in heaven in order to keep us blind to what's going on. It's the little trick we seem to be playing on ourselves. Now, there's a very, very interesting problem because when you take something like psychedelics, it dissolves this ego, it dissolves this identity, it dissolves this purpose, it dissolves this mission, because all these things are related. To have an identity is to have a purpose, is to have a mission. They're all related. All this stuff dissolves, and what happens is we reconnect with the beyond. We actually awaken to the nature of the world. We open our eyes for the first time and we notice the significance of everything. We get hit by the blunt force of reality and what it actually is, and that is that everything is alive and vibrating. It's like everything is made up of a dreaming fire. Now, that's a very, very hard thing to understand, but again, you have to understand things from the concept of heaven, from eternity, from the babies, because when they look down at the matrix they're after making, the only sort of main factor for them is time. And if you understand E=mc² and like Einstein and all that stuff, you'd understand that all still frozen things like rocks and curtains and cars, these are those pieces of matter are actually just energy sitting still for an extremely long period of time. They're just very, very lazy bits of energy. Everything is actually energy. Everything is actually alive. And when you take something like psychedelics, it seems to reveal that to you in a very secret way. Everything is sort of alive, and actually everything is sort of connected to you in a very profound way. And that's actually even more interesting, because this sort of sense of time is not as present in the right brain as it is in the left. This sense of time is the sense of time for the right brain is this ever-living presence. This current moment is all that exists, and it's full and perfect, and it feels like it's sitting within an orchestra and it's looking at all the different people playing music, whereas the left brain sees itself as studying a sort of sheet music and understanding that there's sort of timing and there's no moment. The moment is not really really there. It's the plan, it's the coordination, it's getting the timing right over a set of time. It's the matrix, participating in the matrix, like understanding the matrix, understanding the game, and all this type of stuff. Now the problem is that that's very effective, and that's important for being able to, you know, do a job and pay your taxes and, you know, eat your dinner and stuff like this. But it's not very realistic. It's an abstraction. It's an escape. It's a fleeing into the land of jargon. And this is almost, in some sense, a prison. Now, what we notice, which is so crazy about the psychedelic experience, the DMT experience that Terence McKenna talks about, is that it's so hardcore in how ruthlessly it blows apart that ego, that it dissolves entirely all that jargon, that it completely opens you up to the full force of the ever-living, dreaming fire of reality that just pours into your consciousness and your mind, pours into all your senses, that it freaks you out. It's too heavy. And if you take one like DMT, which is extremely, extremely intense, it goes even a step further, a step of profoundness that is kind of hard to figure out. What happens is you take your DMT, and not only does the world reveal itself as this like dreaming fire, this energy in motion, this sort of thing you're participating in, this giant orchestra, it actually almost rips that apart as well. And it shows you not only that this entire vision that you're seeing, the entire thing in front of your eyes is not real, but you actually go behind reality. It's like you're on a computer, a web page, and you go in and look at the coding of the web page. You actually open that up and you enter the DMT cavern, and inside of it there's the machine elves, these little helpers, these little angels that are tweaking. Hopefully they're angels. Maybe they're sometimes they could be bad, but they're tweaking. They're showing you how to tweak stuff. They're showing you how to code, how to program. They're showing you that behind the world of apparent forms there is actually something more, and something very, very relevant and important. And they teach you the magic power of changing the world with words, with creative expression. And this is all absolutely fascinating stuff, because what happens to this monkey is that he, for the first time, before we have all this internet that can explain to us what happened, this monkey walking through the grasslands actually takes these mushrooms and gets hit for the first time with the blunt force of that reality. He actually figures out for the first time that all is not right in the state of Denmark. He actually goes back to heaven, and you can think of it like, you know, all the boys are sitting there on the clouds together, and they're probably able to watch the TV, because they're like watching a TV screen, so they're able to watch what's going on, and they see one of the boys take some mushrooms, and see one of the baby boyos take some mushrooms, and like, oh my god, he's gonna wake up. And then the guy with the headset on, he's the guy who's after taking the mushrooms, like sort of like jostles around, and then he opens his eyes and he's looking around. You know, like a drunk person when they're really drunk, they like look around, they don't really know what's going on, and all the boys are like standing over them like, oh my god, bro, what's up, how are you, what's up, quick, do this thing, you're back, do this thing here, quick, speak the magic words. And he's like and then he does what they're doing, and then he gets zipped back out of it, and he goes back and he forgets about it. It's like a dream. He forgets about it and doesn't take it serious anymore. And all the boys are like laughing, being like, oh my god, he almost made it, he almost came out, what's going on? It makes you wonder, is something like that happening? Is that what happened with this character, this original monkey, the monkey that set us off this crazy path known as history? Perhaps it was. Perhaps this is what goes on behind the secret realm of existence. And the reason why I can postulate this without getting spanked publicly so that my bottom ends up red by Sam Harris is because I am able to trust the felt presence of direct experience. I don't need to go to the jargonites and stand around and talk about like peer-reviewed studies about the DMT trip and all that type of stuff, because that's silly, because that's outsourcing your ability to experience reality to jargonites and jargon itself. The DMT experience is not, you don't find yourself lost inside a dictionary till the end of time, although maybe we will. That might be hell for all we know. Instead, what happens is all your jargon, you get bullied out of being able to possess your experience, and you're forced to witness something that you can only just sort of hold on like in a roller coaster and feel. It's something that you just have to go through. It's a real experience. It's an authentic experience. And the vast majority of the problems of the modern age has been the jargonization and the inauthenticity of all our experiences. We don't experience things for ourselves anymore, and that's an absolute disaster. And Terence taught me that one first principle that that I took very, very serious, and it was an immensely educating and helpful perspective. Now, despite what people might tell you, this is actually a really good thing, because it means that when you get caught up in your video game and you get your feelings hurt, and for example, you experience the terror of what's actually going on, you're able to actually plug out and come out of it and have a chat with the guy, like your dad, and you can be like, yo, I'm kind of lost, I'm a little bit afraid, I'm a little bit scared, and he can reorientate you in the right direction. He can be like, don't worry, I've got this under control, I know exactly what's happening, I am the source of all life and law and order. I am the creative, life-giving spirit of this entire whole rigmarole. The game is literally fake without me. Like, I'm the agenda. You know, I'm the one who sets it up. Like, I'm the programming code at the center of it. So you don't got to worry that much. You've got me on your side, and you can pop back in there and you can recreate a better avatar more in alignment with me. This is what perhaps you could do if you're doing this stuff right. You destroy this ego, and then you go and you meet with the logos, and you realize you have this like dreamlike creative spirit where you can totally remanifest yourself in the image of the Lord, as you should. You should humbly obey him and follow him and allow him to craft you and shape you. And then what you do is you jump back in and you craft a better avatar. You upgrade, you come back in and you form a better character that is more excellent and takes a step forward. And that's a very abstract idea, so I'm going to show you how that worked through the conception of history, because of course, as Terence McKenna was suggesting, these monkeys all guzzled down their mushrooms. And then what happened is they ripped open the matrix and they met this almighty logos, this realm of imagination and excellence. And then what happened is that allowed them to reconstruct themselves in alignment with this profound order. What does that mean? Well, there's a litany of different ways that this could manifest. For example, this is the source of all artistic quality. And I'm not saying that psychedelic drugs are. I'm saying that this source, you can get to it perhaps through psychedelic drugs. And so these monkeys, they come in contact with this logos, and then they start to realize that they can, take whatever avatar this is they have and bring it closer to the logos, the God. They can make it more excellent. So this that they're doing, this way of talking, they can actually craft that like a magic power and shape that into something higher. And so they turn it into Boyo Alert. They evolve language out of sounds coming out their mouth, instead of just mindlessly running after animals or something like that. They begin to make tools. They begin to take the things around them and put them together like a craft of some sort. They begin to try match these things in straight lines to match the image of that they met in their imagination. They start to become more excellent, and through this they become taller, they become more skilled, they become more sophisticated. And what you get is this very profound being at the beginning of time, early man, who is animated, fully in touch with the world around him, really, really well integrated in what he's doing, highly skilled, and an innovator par excellence that set us up for 1,000 years of economic prosperity, or 20, 30,000 years of prosperity, maybe 1,000,000 years of prosperity that we've gone through, where we've just kept winning to the point where we've taken over the world. And the reason why that happened is because we were the ones who were most in alignment with the logos of the world. And then every time we get more in touch with that, it lifts us up higher. And this becomes more and more sophisticated, because then at some point some of these monkeys get so, their spines get so straight, and their sophisticated techniques get so straight, and their drugs get so good, that they start looking up at the sky and they start to conceptualize certain things from eternity that they didn't know before. And one of them might be that eternity is made of time, that eternity has a beginning and an end. It has a future and a past. And they're like, bro, what? We're like actually in something that like is happening. Like there's like oh my God, there's like a game on here. That's crazy, man. So that means that we can actually hack this game. Oh my God, that's nuts. So what we're going to do is we're going to plant seeds now, and then we're going to feck off, and then we're going to come back, and then the seeds will have grown and we'll eat that seeds. And so what we can do actually is we can just build a house over there beside the seeds and just plant loads of seeds, and we'll never have to hunt for food again. And that was it. That was how things started to go upwards. The conceptualizations of astrology, of time, of the movement of the planets, the giant clock above us. We connected with God, and we taught more about what the Logos. The Logos taught us more about excellent conceptions and higher conceptions. We evolved civilizations, institutions. We evolved into armies and whatnot. Out of the ground rose cities and empires like Babylon, like Rome, higher culture like the poets, all these type of things. It all rose and rose and went higher and higher. Art came into being. We started to grip onto the magic of sound further than just language, and then we turned it into music. Maybe music came first for all we know. And we kept on evolving. The more we stayed in touch with the excellent, the higher that we grew. But then something very, very problematic happened, because this ego, this mission, this identity, this avatar, as it consolidates in an individual, when we grew big enough, we began to consolidate collective egos, collective conceptions of ourselves, collective identities. And this was the beginning of civilization as a huge unit. It's a very, very difficult problem, because a lot of people try to say this stuff is bad, but it is inevitable. And this is when these strange monkeys wandering across the earth started to become civilized monkeys with citizen identities. We became citizens. We became characters walking through the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Hellenic Empire. We had religions instantiated above us, and philosophies and laws and orders and demands and whatnot. Jargon started to get put on top of us, such as good and bad. We started to get imposed to follow morality, the way of the ancestors, as the Romans said. And these institutions started to come in place, and various forms of this stuff rises, and we see these religions all throughout many early societies, and eventually Christianity comes along, one of the most profound and interesting institutions of all. And this is when a hard order descended upon the world. The church comes along, and it postulates and shapes a very firm ego over the Western world. At that point, it wasn't even the West, it was Rome. And it consolidates a sort of sense of itself. It blocks out everything else. Before, in this time, it was very free for all. The Romans weren't too strict about religion or identity or any of that type of stuff. They weren't exactly loose either, but it wasn't as strict as this. But then we come with a frozen, stiff, hard ego. We were all Christians, and if you were not Christians, you are an enemy. And this was both good and bad, because, as always, when you have an ego, you have a mission, you have an identity, you can get stuff done. It may annoy you a little bit, but because the West was unified under the church, it was able to get stuff done. And so this very strong, stiff ego allowed it to ascend into this position of becoming the sort of masters of the world, the colonial empire of the world, where they went out and they Christianized the entire world. And it's a very interesting and scary thing, because it was extremely effective, because they were united in their identity and their missions and their sense of themselves. Now, of course, during this hard order, there was a sort of dogmatism. And think about what Christianity was. It was like jargon, by the book. Don't know what the book says. Don't go against the words. Say the right words. Don't say the wrong words. That's invoking an idol. These type of things. Now, of course, that's all very, very interesting stuff. But there was many people who rebelled against this, because, of course, the problem, the great war in all of history, is the way, as Terence McKenna says, that culture, and these are all institutions of culture, tiles your reality with jargon and separates you from the direct experience of what you could call reality, the living, animated world. Now, you can experience this as the ancient primate a lot more readily, but when you enter into these cultural institutions, what will happen, for example, in Greek paganism, is they had the Eleusinian mysteries on the outskirts of town that you're never allowed to talk about, where they believed that they probably took psychedelics. But then during Christianity, that stuff still sort of floated around, but it was far more frowned upon. It was far more kind of bullied out of the church. It was dogmatized quite a lot as a center of demons and spirits and whatnot. And what happened is that these things like alchemy and magic became a pretty big deal. These almost like secret society and occult type things. During the Renaissance, when the Catholic Italian princes got very, very rich, they began to create very, very, very beautiful scenery, and this was to them the act of magic. Now that's a very, very interesting thing, because we, of course, understand magic from the context of the LARPers in the modern world, which is like, invoke Satan and all stupid stuff like that. But actually these magicians back then, these authentic alchemists and magicians, they were a lot more like how we should understand magic. They were like right-brained artists. They were trying to beautify their reality to suit their right brain. They were trying to break out of their jargonized ego and get in touch with what is divine and the logos, and get in touch with this idea of higher standards, of something glorious and unique and beautiful. And in coming back to this matrix and realizing what they are as these people in an incredibly privileged position who have the chance to redeem and lift the world out of ugliness and fallenness and make it more beautiful. So these were the type of dudes that would have funded Michelangelo to turn the Sistine Chapel from a dull, boring rock in the Matrix to a literal palace in the halls of heaven, one of the most beautiful places on earth. And they did this with all of their houses, and they did this with their style and their dress and the way of conducting themselves. Again, like the monkey, these Renaissance magicians, they tried to evolve themselves. They tried to lift themselves closer to God, closer to the Logos, closer to the Lord. It's like the way music evolves. You look at the history of Western music over this time, and it starts off as sort of primitive, and then it evolves into people like Bach and Beethoven, the great proud Protestant musicians and whatnot, and then it goes and it gets higher and higher and higher until you've got like this amazing 19th century music, which is these massive orchestras following supremely complex laws of harmony that go together. Like, it's so incomprehensibly beautiful that it hits you with the blunt force of some type of godlike divine energy. You just can't fit it into your head. It's too profound. And this is the type of power that these people were trying to get in touch with, and it was very pure and noble power. They were trying to bring things closer to the Lord. The Lord is a creator at root. Now, of course, with all great things, they eventually fall and die. And this is what sadly began to happen with the West. We got so rich that we lost touch with these old things. God died. The nature of reality changed, just like Rome, the same patterns. Everything sort of moved on. We started to move past all this type of stuff. And the radical stiffness of the old order started to get frowned upon, and people wanted to go back to the authentic felt experience, because this is a very interesting nature of these type of journeys. In Rome, it starts off as this vibrant Dionysian felt experience of these warriors following aggression, Mars and the army, and they create Rome, and it's got this vibrant religion. And then over time, the religion gets jargonized, stiff and boring, and then in comes this Dionysian vibrant energy of the god of love and Dionysus and Christ, who it was, rushing through the people, redeeming them, giving them a new hope and a new spirit, promising a new utopia. And so they get on board with that. They, of course, bring down Rome. It sinks into a dark age, but through the consolidation of the dark age of something new, they consolidate Jesus, moving him from a Napoleon felt experience to a jargonized Apollonian experience. And then they shuttle that upwards towards the closer and closer to the Logos until they create Western civilization as we understand it now. But again, the same thing has happened. We are like the late Roman Empire. We are stiff and we are jargonized. We are like, our philosophy, as Nietzsche complained about, was all stiff and jargonized and boring and Immanuel Kantized. And what we need to do is we need to get back in touch with something authentic and something vibrant and real. And of course, if we fail to do this, it's going to happen anyway. And what did happen during the 20th century? Take for example the 60s, which Terence came out of, a vibrant new Dionysian energy of love, of take the drugs, of dissolve the boundaries, and we're going to make something new. The people were trying to throw off that old identity, that old avatar, that old ego, the Western ego, the sense of being a pious Christian. They wanted to throw that stuff off, and they want to throw that off and become something new. And this is, of course, something that Terence championed, and we are living actually in the sort of a later stage of that. We're living in a point where it's starting to consolidate. Now, this is not not all that it seems. And this would be my slight critique on a lot of what Terence says, is because he was very hopeful. I'm sure the early Christians were very hopeful about changing the world. But when they consolidated their reality and bureaucracy and left-brained people came into it, they ended up just making a dark age. They ended up making something that had the church had plenty of problems as well. And that's a very, very difficult thing, because the direct experience with God is a very hard thing to institutionalize. It's very hard to bring it down into the matrix, because it doesn't come from the matrix. That's a hard problem. And so what's happening now is that all these people talking about love in the 60s and all this, they all believe that we'll change the world and make the world a better place. But what's consolidating now is again the same problem. We have a load of jargonites who are bashing words on our heads, trying to get us not to have direct experiences or truthful, authentic relationships with reality. They're trying to shape how we see reality by controlling the jargon. They're like doing what the church did all over again. Just their method of doing this is no longer the actual buildings, but it's more to do with the technology that we use. It's more to do with the media and the education institutions and the various laws that are going into how words work on the internet and whatnot. It's all happening again. There's a new ideology coming again with the same Dionysian energy and the same promise of a utopia. And it's all very, very interesting stuff, all strange stuff that's out of our grip. But you see again the same problem, because it's getting even more intense now. It seems like we're going to entirely enter into a virtual reality. We're going to inception ourselves and completely enter into a total virtual reality, where again we will go one level deeper away from the direct experience of what it seems to be this logos, which is the heaven, which is where we actually might come from, which is where all the boyos are hanging out up there on cloud 9, where we have long ago decided we play a game. Only now what we're doing is we're sort of starting to imprison ourselves. We've gotten a bit too serious with this game in our desire, in our lust to get back to this utopia, this logos, this unity, this heaven that we're seeking. We're actually dragging ourselves further and further and further down into hell. And I guess it's paramount that we as a people coordinate ourselves and think about this stuff and make sure that we're not digging ourselves a hole that's too deep to climb out of, all in the name of sport, all in the name of seeking something that was up in the sky, not down on the ground. Very interesting problem. And I guess this will be the thing I'll close on. I'll talk briefly about Terence and his challenge to the West, because this personal idea that we can do, where you have this ego and that you're in the matrix and the ego is attached to the matrix, and you're able to actually like leave that ego and go and join with the logos and learn what it means to be excellent. And this is sort of what's happening right now. We're sort of saying, all right, well, like the Renaissance magicians tried to move themselves up into like Italian style, become one of the premier centers of excellence in the whole world. We are at that point now where we've got all this power and this technology and this wealth and this abundance. How do we move ourselves up to something that's closer to the Lord, something that's more excellent? Do we merge with machines? How do we use this power that we have? And maybe what we do need to do is we need to dive into the other side and get in contact with the logos. But I think Terence and a lot of these guys, they might have made the mistake of saying, don't go back, completely dissolve the ego entirely and completely leave it all behind, and in some sense leave matter behind entirely, leave nature behind entirely. Though I might be straw manning him a bit, I understand. Let's just kind of play with that for a second, because I know it can be kind of hell to be around here, and you see all the bad stuff that's going on. You see the Western ego that reached that apex through Christianity and through its tentacles around the world, and essentially Christianized the whole world and capitalized the whole world, and took those native tribes, and chopped down their rainforest and destroyed their practices and bullied them into having sugar, tobacco, working on a tobacco plant and reading the Bible, and then actually destroyed things like, for example, Terence discovered ayahuasca. Imagine if the capitalists had got to Peru and destroyed ayahuasca. You would have lost this ability to get a direct experience of what you could have called the felt presence of the logos. You would have lost a very, very powerful strategy to get there, because think about what's going on. In some sense, the West is unable to spiritually think about these things, go through the traditional routes like meditation or any of these things, because mentally we are scientists. And so the only thing that seems to be able to convince us is the idea that these things are actually drugs. These things are actually manifest as real drugs. That thing seems to work for us. We seem to tolerate that. We seem to accept that because it fits into our worldview. Unfortunately, it destroys our worldview at the same time. And so imagine if our capitalism had destroyed that and we wouldn't be able to do that. We'd be trapped in this silly prison, this silly ego, until we spiral out of control and do something stupid. And what if that doing something stupid is we actually deracinate and destroy the earth? What happens if, like, we go to ancient Europe full of those Renaissance cities, and we're not building anything like that anymore? Instead, we're taking those ancient, imagine the Sistine Chapel as a McDonald's. That seems like the destiny of Europe going forward. If high capitalism has its way, there'll be no Europe left. It won't be something like that anymore. It'll be morphed into something, everything will be like frozen, stiff, boring tax havens, and then the other half of the buildings will be like tax collectors, and everybody will be like, I don't know, working on virtual reality so that they can try escape their pain or something like this. There will be no world there. And then what has happened and what is continuing to happen to the natural world is absolutely essential that we kind of wake up into. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you don't destroy your ego entirely and become mute and incompetent and dead. You want to also have an ego, because you go and you visit the Lord and you get in touch with the logos of excellence inside heaven, up there outside the matrix, and then you kind of join back in and you come down and you, like the Renaissance guys, like the monkey, you try raise the standards. And I believe that this is the one problem that we might have, is that a lot of our understanding of raising standards is more about destroying everything and hoping that everything works out, and if we're just happy and nice enough, everything's going to be fine and there's going to be no problems. But of course, there's other people in the world. We have President Z here, who's an absolute competent and genius and very, very smart and serious person who's looking to do well for his people, which he's absolutely entitled to do. And he's going to set the agenda, because if he sees the West, who feel guilty like they should for being greedy and disgusting, and he sees them slipping, getting caught up in these silly self-hating ideologies, trying to escape into pure right-brainism where they're just licking walls talking about yoga all day, he's just going to build a lovely 5G society that acts almost like a united being and just swamp over the earth and decide the future of humanity. And maybe we want to do that. Maybe we're allowed to have an ego. Maybe it's okay for us to decide a destiny. Maybe all we have to do is go into ourselves and understand the spiritual crisis we're in that we've made two problematic riddles. First of all, we're telling ourselves that this ego is reality for us and there's no way around it. And then we're also saying that this ego is something we should hate. And so inside this ego, we have to fill it with jargon that says that we're demons, that we should hate ourselves. And then when we leave this ego with all our experiences with drugs, we refuse to believe that there is any logos at the center of it. We refuse to believe that there is something that can give us excellent standards that we can obey, because that's hard, because that makes our bellies hurt, because that makes our mind feel ashamed, because it makes us feel not good enough. But that is not the point. The point is that you leave this stuff and humbly come in contact with something glorious and profound and higher, and it will lift you up, and it will lift the whole world up along with you. And I think Terence had some very good intentions. I'm trying to jiggle some of his ideas here a little bit, present something a little bit more boyified, but nonetheless, he did practice what he preached. He had a botanical garden where he was trying to preserve all these ancient medicines, because he really did believe this stuff. He was quite an authentic dude. He was really worried about that global homogenization, and he was trying to look out for native, traditional, and global cultures. And this is something that I think we should take serious as well. We just have to make sure we don't make the mistake of thinking that the world is a yoga studio where you can just be, you can just melt into the floor and think that that's some type of success or that's some type of goal. I think we need to think more in terms of what we're trying to contact and what we're trying to get in touch with. And it's not some tyrannical thing. It's not some jargon you bash over people's head. It's a felt experience of something living and alive, full of divine child energy, full of the dreaming fire of reality that Psychedelics reveals. And you have it inside your head and you don't need to get in touch with it. And for this reason, I endorse Terence McKenna as a very, very interesting person to think, listen to, and think about. And I hope you enjoyed all the juice I brought to you today. I hope you're just going to start dribbling and morphing and traveling to the astral plane and writing and bringing the selfish gene to God and telling him that he's actually not real. That would be great if you could do that. And lastly, time to get some capitalism in. If you want to do a controlled dissolution of your ego, you can, of course, sign up for my program. You can come and work with me. Yes, that is absolutely available here. We will sort out the West ego later. Somewhere else we can do that. Not here. Here we're just going to keep going on with the commodification of spirituality as the bio is going forward. So if you're interested, if you would like to work on various things, if you would like to apply some of these big ideas, if you'd like to work on getting in touch with your dreams, getting in touch with your right brain, getting in touch with your creativity, there's various ways that I've found to do this more naturally, not using psychedelics. Some of the most profound results I got were actually from doing stuff like what Jung talks about, extended dream reading and all these type of things. Instead of going too mad or facing your emotions rawly for what they are, instead of going a little bit too mad with psychedelics, it's always good to have a well cleaned up mind before you go approaching these things, so that you can leap straight to the ghost without getting caught by something more shadowy on the way. So if you're interested in that, you can pop down below and there'll be a link for one-on-one sessions. Just sign up, 15-minute call, we'll have a chat, and then we will sort out and see if we're a good fit to go forward. And if you would like to support me in any way on Patreon, I have a Boyo podcast. It's a Patreon replacement now. It's over on my website. It's very, very juicy, and I recommend you check it out. And I think we'll end with a song as usual. Stay classy, people. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
I didn't get into this business by being an airhead or a screwball. My attitude was always, if it's real, it can take the pressure. You know, you don't have to pussyfoot around the real thing. If they're telling you, you know, oh, you must lower your voice and avert your gaze or this and that, then you're probably in the presence of crap. Because the real thing is real. It doesn't demand that you adjust your opinion to suit it. It's real. That means it is preeminent. That means it sets the agenda. And I studied yoga. I wandered around in the East. I was fast shuffled by beady-eyed little men in dhotis. I know the whole spiritual supermarket and rigmarole. And I find nothing there to interest me on the level of, 5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms in silent darkness. I mean, that's where the pedal meets the metal. That's where the rubber meets the road. And the inspiration for me to get up and talk to an audience like this simply comes from the fact that I cannot believe that this could be kept under wraps the way it has. I mean, I kidded with you earlier that they would make sex illegal if they could. Well, they can't, so it isn't. But the psychedelic experience is as central to understanding your humanness as having sex, or having a child, or having responsibilities, or having hopes and dreams, and yet it is illegal. We are somehow told we are infantilized. We're told, you can wander around within the sanctioned playpen of ordinary consciousness, and we have some intoxicants over here if you want to mess yourself up. We've got some scotch here and some tobacco and red meat and some sugar and a little TV and so forth and so on. But these boundary dissolving hallucinogens that give you a sense of unity with your fellow man and nature are somehow forbidden. This is an outrage. It's a sign of cultural immaturity, and the fact that we tolerate it is a sign that we are living in a society as oppressed as any society in the past. My thing is not about my opinion or what I saw in Africa or anything like that. This is, get it straight, this is about an experience, not my experience, your experience. It's about an experience which you have, like getting laid or like going to Africa. You must do the experience. Otherwise, it's just whistling past the graveyard. And we're not talking about something like being born again or meeting the flying saucers or something like that, where good works and prayer are the method. No, if you take a sufficient dose of an active compound, it will deliver itself to you on the money. If it doesn't work, take more. Nobody is in a position to dismiss this just because it didn't work for them on one or two tries. This is an art. It's an art. It's something you coax into existence. I mean, you have to learn to make love. You have to learn to speak English. Anything worth doing is an art that is acquired. This is part of our birthright, perhaps the most important part of our birthright. These substances will deliver. It is the confoundment of psychology and science generally, and that's why it's so touchy for cultural institutions. But you are not a cultural institution. You are a free and independent human being, and these things have your name written on them in big gold letters. Yes, here. The way I think of these psychedelics, or a different way, is that they're catalysts for the imagination. Catalysts to say what has never been said, to see what has never been seen, to draw, paint, sing, sculpt, dance, and act what has never before been done, to push the envelope of creativity and language. And what's really important is, I call it the felt presence of direct experience, which is a fancy term which just simply means we have to stop consuming our culture. We have to create culture. Don't watch TV. Don't read magazines. Don't even listen to NPR. Create your own road show. The nexus of space and time where you are now is the most immediate sector of your universe. And if you're worrying about Michael Jackson or Bill Clinton or somebody else, then you are disempowered. You're giving it all away to icons. Icons which are maintained by an electronic media, so that you want to dress like X or have lips like Y or something. This is shit-brained, this kind of thinking. That is all cultural diversion, and what is real is you and your friends and your associations, your highs, your orgasms, your hopes, your plans, your fears. And we're told, no, we're unimportant, we're peripheral, get a degree, get a job, get a this, get a that, and then you're a player. You don't even want to play in that game. You want to reclaim your mind and get it out of the hands of the cultural engineers who want to turn you into a half-baked moron consuming all this trash that's being manufactured out of the bones of a dying world. Where is that at? Yeah, over here.